Hey YouTube, we are back with the next tier list. We're doing a tier 9 bugs weapons tier list now. This is after the most recent patch as of the 6th or 18th of June. It came out a couple days ago and they adjusted quite a few weapons, so I feel like it's time that we revisit and do another tier list. All right, starting off with the absolute king of all bug missions. I don't think much has to be said on why the Incendiary Breaker is absolutely insane. Surprisingly, it didn't receive a nerf. I expected at least just a little bit of burn damage decrease. At the moment, it performs basically as good as Gas Strike or Napalm, minus like a little bit of the explosion of Napalm. This thing is Napalm Strike in your hands at all times. It is disgusting. I don't think there's any debate on what the best bug weapon is, and it's insane. It's so crazy. Going into the regular breaker, it's definitely falling down the list as time goes on because it seems like they keep buffing everything around it and they won't really revert the regular breaker anywhere. It's just kind of falling down. I think I've been having a lot of discussions with my stream, and I would agree that I believe it probably at least deserves to go back to the way it once was, where it has the extra magazines and also extra rounds in those magazines. It's just hurt a little too much by the ammo economy, especially when you're comparing it to the Incendiary Breaker, which can wipe out an entire bug reach basically by itself outside of the armored enemies, which that's why you have a support weapon. So hopefully there's some patches in the future that can address, the Breaker slowly falling down this list. Punisher. I've been enjoying using the Punisher ever since the patch. Nothing's changed. I've just been testing it out and honestly enjoying it. It's just, if you don't want to really think about what shotgun you want to bring and you don't want to use the Incendiary Breaker anymore, Punisher's just a great pickup. You don't have to think about reloading really. Just press the R key every once in a while. You only have one massive clip. The stagger is very strong. The upfront damage is good versus a wide variety of enemies. Its only weakness is basically just lack of medium pen. So hopefully in the future, more weapons are kind of balanced similar to the Punisher, where it fits in this great area of space and it's good to use. It's not by far the best or anything like that, but it's a fun weapon and just kind of, hey, I want to use a shotgun. Let's use this one. The Spray and Pray has continued to fall down, in my opinion. The last time I put it all the way down in F tier, and there's definitely a bunch of people in the comment section that were not happy with that. I still kind of stand by the fact that it's basically the Incendiary Breaker, but worse in every way possible. Less damage per shot, by far worse handling. Basically the same magazine, so I guess it has that. But does that really matter when you get so much less damage per shot? It doesn't have the incendiary fire damage. I don't really see the point in the Spray and Pray at the moment. The Breaker just does everything better at the moment, and it's just I can't get behind it. I can't get behind it. I feel like it needs to be put all the way down there so it can be brought back up, or at least see some benefits of the Incendiary Breaker come down a little bit, and maybe this one gets brought back up. It might be a little unfair to put it this low in the tier list, but at the same time, it needs a change. It absolutely needs it. It's one of the weakest weapons in the game, especially in the shotgun category. Going to the Slugger, this is one of those sleepers that I think the community as a whole have kind of moved as far away from the Slugger as possible after the nerfs that it received way back, 3 months ago almost now, and that was where the rise of the Dominator happened. Slugger definitely received too big of a tune. It probably should have kept some more of its stagger, but it's still a fantastic bug weapon if you have a high degree of accuracy. It's still 1-tap Stalkers in the head, 2-tap Brood Commanders in the head, has medium pen, good damage, easy reload, because obviously it has that one big clip. It's a good weapon. I'm surprised more people don't use it, and maybe it's because there's a stigma of just it got nerfed, I can't use this, or it's just people would just rather use the Incendiary Breaker. Why aim so much with the Slugger when you can just spray down everything at a distance? I get it. It would most likely going to end up around the A- tier. I don't think it deserves to be in B. I definitely think it has more than enough utility being medium pen and has more than enough damage that I don't think it needs to be any lower. Going next into the Blitzer, I absolutely love this thing. It is an A+ pick, no doubt in my mind, but many probably will be asking, why is it on an S? I just feel like it's lacking from range and it's lacking from consistency. And we all know why it's lacking from the consistency. Sometimes when you pull the trigger, you're just gonna see a little fizzle from the end of the barrel and it doesn't actually connect with the enemy and you're like, what is going on? they know it's an issue and they're working on it. Hopefully that can get addressed at some point in the future. It also seems to have an issue overall just with range, which you find a little bit weird because you're like, well, it's determined mission, you don't need that much range. It is nice to be able to engage enemies before they're almost in spitting or pouncing distance like a hunter. So I would love to maybe see a little more range, or just keep it the way it is and make it more of a consistent weapon to use, so I don't feel like I'm fighting it and trying to constantly like reposition around dead bodies and stuff like that are blocking line of sight. So hopefully in the future that can get addressed. Going into the Adjudicator, I've been really enjoying it a lot more. They gave it recently 5 more rounds in reserve or per magazine. If you're wondering why my mouse is acting all weird, Luna is looking for more attention. Hi, Luna. You going back on the shoulder? Okay. Okay. So I've been really enjoying it a lot more. With short control bursts, I think the recoil is fine. It doesn't quite have as much damage as the Tenderizer, but I think it has enough to put it in like that A-, B+ territory. It's quite useful because it has the medium pen, and then it has a good fire rate. The 30 rounds definitely feels a lot better than the 25 previously. Yeah, I definitely think it's in a better spot. It still suffers from like an overall ammo shortage. All ARs tend to feel like that, especially when we compare it to the Breaker Incendiary or really any of the shotguns. It definitely has like an ammo. So you're probably going to see it end up around A-, B+ on the tier list. We're just going to sit in B+ for now, and we'll see how the tier list progresses through it. Diligence is an okay pick for bugs. It's solid, not the greatest, but if you're a good shot, I could see this really popping off for some. Almost want to put it in C+, but I think it deserves to be somewhere in the B- territory. I don't know what else they could do to really give it more other than, you know, just give it more damage, more bullets. Maybe that would make me enjoy it more, but typically the DMR classification, especially if it doesn't have like medium pen, really doesn't feel great. You know, the Diligence counter sniper or Diligence itself has more of a usage in bots, in my opinion, whereas the counter sniper, which we're going to go into next, I think has definitely more of a purpose. Bye, Luna. She heard the door open, I think, and she's very curious about what's going on. The Diligence counter sniper, I've been enjoying using every once in a while in bug missions. It feels a hell of a lot better since, you know, what was it, more than a month ago when they gave it better handling and a little bit more damage. But similar to the Diligence itself, although it has the medium pen, it doesn't have a great ammo supply, and on top of that, the handling still isn't as good. So are you really going to be using this against like a hunter swarm or something like that? Probably not. You're going to want to use something else, but this can be useful against, you know, your bottle spears and stuff like that, which is why I think it deserves to be higher in the B section, but not quite A. It's not like with bots where, you know, that high degree of accuracy is incredibly powerful, like against Devastators. So I think B+ would be a fair assessment of the Diligence counter sniper, with Adjudicator, you know, slight ahead of it because it's more of a automatic rifle, whereas the counter sniper, a little bit too slow firing. Yes, you can spam it, but you know, you're not really going to be using it like the Adjudicator. The Dominator, a bunch of people have been asking me, do I still feel like it deserves to be an S tier? And honestly, I do believe it still deserves to be somewhere in that like S- A+ range. Although the handling is not the best, it is incredible when you pair it with a weapon that deals with the flak or the chaff of the Terminids, and you bring this thing for your Brood Commanders, you bring this thing for your Hive Guards, you bring this thing for your Bottle Spewers, and hell, even it does fairly good against your Chargers. So like, I gotta say, I do still highly recommend using the Dominator. Just make sure you're picking a sidearm that can fill in those gaps versus the Hunters, or you're picking a support weapon that can kind of support, like actually support the Dominator, right? So maybe you're bringing like Flamethrower and Dominator, not a bad choice. Use the Flamethrower for like your Hunter Swarms, and then you got the Dominator for everything else. Going in with the Defender I think is like your middle B, whereas you're probably going to put your Pummeler higher. Most people are just going to be like me, and I have no doubt any part of my mind is like, yeah, I will give up 5 damage for the immense amount of CC I can get from the Pummeler. I think the Pummeler is just a solid middle A pick. If you were looking to just stun lock enemies. Although you can't stun lock chargers anymore in the most recent patch that came out a couple days ago, it's still a fantastic option when dealing with the Terminid Swarm. It's not really killing everything, but it's a great support weapon. Or, hey, if you hate Stalkers, this thing is still great at stun locking them and then aiming for the mouth, and you're killing them within a couple more shots. Really good for that. Really good. The Knight, I feel like the devs might be afraid of it possibly turning into a pay-to-win weapon. They still haven't addressed its half reserves when resupplied. And also, you kind of are forced to use it in burst fire. If you use it in full auto, you're just using way too much ammo and you don't have that much in reserve. It can be a fun weapon to use, and it can be fairly proficient if you put it in burst fire, like I said, and you're fairly accurate with your like bursts, your small control bursts around the mouth of most enemies, or like the forehead of a warrior. I can't necessarily recommend it, and I don't think it deserves to be in that good area of the B tier. So hopefully it gets addressed in the future. I know they might be worried about it turning into pay to win because it's only in the Super Citizen Edition, but it still needs a little love. Okay, crossbow. Crossbow was a really interesting one. If you didn't see the patch, they allow it to now blow up bug holes and fabricators, which is really interesting. And they gave it medium pen. Those are the main two. It's basically now just the alter ego to the Eruptor. If you don't like the Eruptor, give the explosive crossbow a try. You're not exactly going to be using the explosive crossbow in close range, but it's really strong in those situations where you have a support weapon that you're mostly leaning on, and you need an explosive crossbow to maybe deal with a ball spewer or, you know, massive amounts of like nests and stuff like that, because maybe your support weapon can't blow open a nest. I really enjoyed using it, and it's been a lot of fun. I think it deserves to be like in that middle A scenario. It's got an incredible amount of utility. It's not the best for ad clear, especially since they didn't give it back the explosive radius to my knowledge. I've been using it a lot, and it didn't really seem like it had that same amount of explosive radius, but it's very strong, and I would highly recommend using it after the latest patch. Blow up some bug holes with it. Bring a support weapon that maybe can't, like a flamethrower, or, you know, maybe you're going to bring the Quasar, and this will be the thing that blows up your bug holes. Give it a try. It's quite good. Going into the Eruptor next, I have a little bit of a bias here. I prefer the Eruptor over the crossbow. Some people might prefer the crossbow over the Eruptor, but they are essentially the same class of weapon. They're primary weapons that can do what most primary weapons can't by blowing up bug holes. And because I am someone who loves doing the animation cancel to cycle rounds faster with the Eruptor, for those who don't know, you can open up the stratagem window in between shots, so you don't have to charge the hammer every single time between shots. Other ways you can do it is just like quick swapping back between weapons, but the stratagem window ends up being the fastest and the best. I could absolutely see why someone would prefer the explosive crossbow if they don't do that, because cycling each individual shot is quite a bit slower than how fast you can put rounds down range with the crossbow. Personally, I do the animation cancel, so it's not a big deal for me, but some may feel differently on that topic. I'm hoping that when they do eventually fix the animation cancel, they do increase how fast you can cycle rounds, just to keep things feeling pretty good with the Eruptor, because if they took away the animation cancel today, all of a sudden the Eruptor probably goes to like A- B+ territory, because it's just going to fire so much slower than the crossbow. Even though the crossbow is a little harder to use because it's a slower projectile and an arrow and so forth, but I feel like I'd probably go back to using the crossbow. Concussive Liberator is in an awkward spot. They keep giving it more damage, but it just lacks overall utility compared to the Pummeler. I just don't see why I would use the Concussive Liberator over the Pummeler, when the Pummeler just does everything the Concussive Liberator does, but basically just does it better, essentially. I don't quite know what the Concussive Liberator's point is at the moment. You know, I think you could argue that it's probably like B- just because it still does a lot of the things that the Pummeler does. I would just not recommend it when you have the Pummeler right there and it is a one-handed weapon. I'm not sure. Hopefully they continue to bump up the rest of the ARs. Similarly, the Liberator Penetrator. This one's been going down the list as well. It started off quite high. I believe one of my first tier lists I ever did for Terminids, the Liberator Penetrator was like around A tier, and it's just been dropping over time as they buff up other weapons around it. Liberator Penetrator has only received one change in the last like bunch of months, and it was to give it to the full ammo, full auto. It gave it full auto, which helped it, you know, make it feel more like an assault rifle, but it still lacks stopping power. I believe off the top of my head, it's 55 damage or 45 damage per shot, which is nice when it comes to medium pen, because, you know, you start over penning enemies like the Brute Commander's Head, which takes significantly less shots to kill than like a regular Liberator. But at the end of the day, versus regular chaff, if you're not always hitting the weak spot or always hitting the optimal spot, this thing feels like a pea shooter, and that's not good. So it needs more upfront damage, because the Adjudicator just sits there as the medium pen option for ARs and just does it better just because it has more damage per shot. So hopefully they can give it more love. I could absolutely see why people might even put it lower than B-, but I feel like it's pretty fair. It's not like it's not killing things, it's just not doing it very efficiently. The normal Liberator is right next to the Diligence or like the Breaker or the Defender. I do think the Defender is a better choice than the Liberator, which is why I'm going to definitely put the Defender higher in that B tier. Liberator, just, it's a solid weapon. It's your starter weapon. It's not a bad weapon, but it just kind of got power crept by everything around it. Rightfully so to some extent, because some people want there to be more of a horizontal progression as far as weapons, whereas the developers have said that they wanted more of a, you know, they want more of a, some people want more of a vertical progression, whereas the developers want more of a horizontal, where, you know, every weapon is competitive against every weapon. They're just, you're picking a niche, or you're picking this weapon because it feels better than that weapon. So we'll see what they do in the future, but the Liberator is kind of like that mid-tier, you know, it just works, but there are better options out there. Liberator Carbine that we just got is an interesting one. I've been dancing around in my head on whether or not I wanted to put it lower or higher than the Liberator. In some extent, the Liberator Carbine is just a better version of the Liberator, just because it has effectively 30 to 40% more fire rate, whereas they do the exact same amount of damage. The Liberator Carbine has more recoil per shot because it's a carbine rather than the full bulb of the Liberator. I do like the Liberator Carbine, but I do prefer the Liberator overall. The Liberator Carbine just really suffers from like a lack of ammo, because if you want to use it with that fire rate, it'll be out of ammo in no time whatsoever. So I found myself kind of just burst firing it, or like trying to be optimally, you know, precise to make sure that like that ammo can stretch to my next resupply. Because of that, I can't really gush over it. It definitely needs, it basically feels like all ARs in the game need at least 2 more magazines each. And that could probably extend to basically every automatic rifle, especially if they're not going to touch the Incendiary Breaker. The Incendiary Breaker is just so efficient versus every weapon and killing in the Terminated fleet or army that, like, why would you bring, you know, a lot of these weapons when they're just going to run out of ammo before you can get anywhere near the kill number of the Incendiary Breaker? So here's hoping that they do a little bit more tuning in that regard. The Tenderizer has been an absolute fun weapon to use, and I've been really enjoying it, but it suffers from the same issue as all the other ARs. Like I just said, all the ARs could just benefit from 2 more mags. Absolutely, the Tenderizer can. I love how much damage it does. I love how accurate it is. I like that it's a, you know, high DPS weapon, but with a relatively smaller magazine and not as big on the ammo reserves, but I feel like I can't use it. The only time I ever felt like I could use it was I was using a supply backpack for another support weapon. I think it was like a GL at the time. So I kind of felt like I could just spray it, and it felt great in that situation, but I just run out of ammo if I do that in any other situation where I don't have ammo constantly coming in. Yes, I'm sure people would argue, well, if you're going POI, hopping from POI to POI, or you're constantly camping that next resupply call in, you know, you can use the Tenderizer quite a bit. And, you know, maybe for those people, they can use it more like in the A tier, but it only having light pen as well definitely hurts it, and it doesn't quite have as much utility. It's more just like your light DPS weapon. It's kind of a tough sell if it doesn't have more ammo innately for me, but I think B+ is quite fair for it. Plasma Punisher. I don't think anyone is surprised to see this in A tier. It's kind of like your alternative to your regular Punisher. It's explosive. It bullies enemies, tons of knockback, good AoE, fairly good ammo economy. It's the grenade launcher without actually using the grenade launcher. It's strong. I think it's stronger in bot missions than in bug missions, because when a bug gets too close to you, you can't really use it, or else you're just either going to knock yourself back 10 meters or you're going to kill yourself by accident. So you definitely need to bring some kind of either support weapon or secondary weapon to support it in those like weird transitional areas where it's like too close to fire it, but not quite far enough away that I'm not going to like hurt myself or knock myself down, making myself more vulnerable. So definitely make sure to bring a secondary or support weapon that can kind of pair well with it. The Purifier, I think is like a middle B tier. I'm glad that it finally got its pen back, but it still doesn't feel great in bugs. I like it quite a bit in bot missions just because it got its pen, it's more useful, but it still has a really slow charge rate. And until it gets a better charge rate, I have a hard time recommending it anything higher than like middle B. It's explosive and has medium pen, which are 2 very important things in the realm of Terminated Tier 9 missions. If you get Bile Spewers, it's quite good against Bile Spewers. If you just get regular Terminated enemies, it's got medium pen, so it can kill quite a few of them without being inefficient. And it's explosive, so it's kind of like a jack of all trades. It can kind of bully enemies similar to the Punisher Plasma because it has a nice AoE and lots of stagger, but its fire rate really hurts it against bugs. And if you don't have like teammates kind of pulling aggro, it can feel like you can get overrun very fast, and it runs into the same problem as you're not going to use this in close range. 1, because the charge time is really awkward in close range, and 2, you possibly kill yourself because of the explosive. So careful with it. I do think it can be rather useful, but middle B is, I think, is as far as it's going to go until it gets a faster charge time. And that's all I'd really change for Arrowhead to do. Or they go the complete opposite direction. They just give it way more upfront damage, so you're kind of using it for high priority targets, whereas you're not going to use it versus like let's say a hunter. Scorcher, I still think is a very solid weapon for bugs, although it has ammo concerns, which I think is very fair if you don't think it deserves to be an S tier. But I think many would argue that like it's so good at killing a charger, even the new behemoth chargers, because the charger butts essentially have the same HP, if I'm not mistaken. But it's also good at killing the stomach of Bile Titans. And if you haven't played since the patch, Bile Titans seem more lethal. They seem better at tracking you as you move around as they spit. And their spit seems to have a larger cone and area of effect. So I've definitely been caught off quite a few times where I'm like, wow, that just hit me. That he just killed me that fast. Having the Scorcher on your hip, fantastic for taking care of at least one of the two sacks underneath them. They're not going to spit at you anymore. Then they just kind of run at you. And, you know, at this point, if you're doing tier 9 Helldives, you're probably pretty, you know, consistently good at running away from Bile Titan or at least baiting out the attacks. So I think it still deserves to be an S, but totally understand if someone believes it should be lower. Scythe is an interesting one. I don't think it deserves to be in C tier anymore. It's starting to grow on me over time. I still think it needs to have a better scope and a little bit better fire time, but I think B- is fair for it. You still need to be very precise, and it doesn't have anything more than light pen, but it is getting better, and it is making me enjoy it more over time. But it is still not nearly as good as the Sickle. The Sickle is your middle A, like basically right next to the Blitzer A+. It's just fantastic. You already know why the Sickle is great because you've been using it. Even though it lost those 3 extra radiators, it's still fantastic ammo economy. You still have those 3 if you overheat, but if you don't, you got basically unlimited ammo. Great scope, good fire rate, good damage. You know, yeah, it does 5 less damage than the regular Liberator, but like, who cares when you have so many more shots and you have a better fire rate than the regular Liberator? It's just so good. If you want to use an AR, this is by far the best AR, unless you need to have medium pen from like the Adjudicator or something like that. It's really strong. Okay, going into the secondary weapons, I think the Verdict is a solid B+. I enjoy using it. It is fun. It has a decent amount of stopping power, but it doesn't have that extra bit of oomph that other secondary weapons have, either through pure damage output or the special little medium pen that the Senator has, for instance. So that being said, we have the Redeemer. I'm going to put it in middle A. Or like A+. I haven't used it that much just because I've been trying to use other things for like, because in the first 3 months of the game, I used nothing but the Redeemer. It was by far the best, and then you probably saw my tier list. I always put it in S tier. I'm gonna put it a little lower. I think it could easily be considered the best terminated secondary overall still, but I've just been using it less just because there's other options that are significantly more useful at times. And that being said, the grenade pistol. This might surprise some people that I'm putting it in S tier, but I just find myself bringing this thing as the utility. I don't really kill that much with it, and it has a terrible ammo economy, but the pure amount of utility of I bring this thing for bug holes, that's about it, right? I bring my primary weapon for killing other things, or I bring my support weapon and my primary weapon for everything else, and I bring this thing for bug holes. Now, if I am bringing like an autocannon or something like that, obviously I'll take off the grenade pistol and then I'll put on the Redeemer or something like that. But for anyone that is bringing a support weapon that isn't good at clearing bug holes, grenade pistol is just so freaking good. The only way it could get better and like get to like S+ or something like that is if it got a better ammo economy. I think it's pretty fair to be an S tier. If you don't believe that, you know, I totally get it. And I've been putting it in A tier or such for a long time, and it's probably bouncing between the two depending on your loadout. Peacemaker is basically just a worse off Verdict until they can give it more ammo overall. I just feel like it's in an awkward place where I'd just rather use the Verdict. It's fine that the Peacemaker does less damage. It just needs more shots. You know, I want it to be like maybe the more forgiving version of the Verdict, less recoil, more shots available to be put down range because of the backup ammo supply, especially since they share the same stats essentially with the Redeemer. I know it got more damage, but essentially the Redeemer and the Peacemaker are constant at odds with each other, but the Redeemer just has the better DPS. It has lots of rounds in magazine or in reserve. It's just fantastic. It just is. Senator is right there up next to the Redeemer. I could absolutely see people enjoying using the Senator as like your pull-out, big iron against, your medium pen enemies. Although I still think it deserves a little bit more damage and maybe a scope of some kind to be a little more accurate when using it in first person, it's still a very good weapon to use in those situations where you need medium pen and maybe you don't have any medium pen in your loadout. Very fun weapon to use, especially with the speed loader improving its overall usage. It could still use a better ammo economy. It doesn't have nearly as good of an ammo economy as the Redeemer, but it has high upfront damage and medium pen, so I think it deserves to be an A tier. The Dagger is probably going to be like C+. I just feel like it doesn't have enough fire time. It overheats way too fast. If like anything more than like 2 hunters are in front of you, this thing's going to overheat on you and maybe not kill all 3 hunters that are pouncing on you. I'm not a huge fan of how that feels. And until they give like both the scythe and the dagger more fire time, especially one closer to the sickle, I can't necessarily recommend it. The Bushwhacker has been an interesting one on where I want to place it. Part of me wants to place it closer to like B+. Part of me wants to put it more like A-, but honestly, I kind of just want to put it right next to the Redeemer Senator and the Bushwhacker right next to it. I've been really enjoying using this thing. I don't think it's as good as the Redeemer overall, but the utility of stagger, whereas you have the Redeemer as like your all-around killing Terminids, you have the Senator for more of like your precision and needing medium pen weapons, and then you have the Bushwhacker for CC and just overall like, hey, I need this thing dead immediately, especially if you put it in the triple shot. Been really enjoying it versus Stalkers because it has a stagger effect on par with the Punisher, and I really enjoy using that. It's like having a Punisher in your back pocket. At any time you just pull it out, it staggers a wide variety of enemies in front of you, or just shunts down a Stalker trying to kill you. It's been really good. Typically, I'm taking the first shot of the Stalker, and he's kind of like wincing and pushing back a little bit, and the next 2 shots I try to get closer and finish him off. It's really useful for that. Highly recommend trying it out. It's been definitely the star of the new Warbond, I must say. All right, going into our grenades. The Impact Incendiary, I do enjoy. I would probably put that like A tier, somewhere in A tier. It's solid. You just throw it at a bug breach. It's, Incendiary Breaker, but in grenade form in many respects. It has a little bit of AoE damage, but then pair that with just like the utility of having a napalm in your pocket. It's quite useful. I do enjoy it. The Frag Grenade, I think, just needs some love. It's going to go right down into C tier. Yes, it has a larger explosive radius, but the damage of it is lacking. So I find that when I'm using it, a lot of the time, enemies are just surviving. Although it's affecting more enemies, I need to use 2 grenades instead of 1. So yeah, I really hope that they can do something to the frag grenade in the future, either giving it even more explosive radius to really make it worth, or giving it just at least a little bit more damage. High explosive, I don't think there's any surprise. It's just B tier. It does a lot of damage, but it doesn't really do anything special. If you really wanted to perform anything like the Impact, you have to put more time into cooking the grenade than throwing it. But some people will probably like the high explosive for dealing with, bug holes. It's easier to get it inside that ring and it to fall actually inside. So I think B+, A- would be totally fair, depending on how much you like it. Impact, I don't think there's any surprise. I think it goes right up to S tier. This thing is insane. It has medium plus pen. It can deal with Shrieker Nest. It can do a ton of damage to a charger, especially near the aft part. It's really good for horde clearing. Ball Spears hate this thing. It's just so good. It's just so good. There's no reason why I wouldn't put it all the way up here. I could see someone maybe putting it a little bit lower, but it's still so freaking strong. The regular Incendiary, I think, goes right next to the high explosive. It's kind of just the worst version of the Impact Incendiary, in my opinion. I would much rather the Impact Incendiary just because of the immediacy of it, and I don't have to, pull the pin, hold it for a second if I want it to maybe, blow up a little bit sooner or anything like that. I would just much rather use the Impact. I think it's pretty fair. Smoke, I think is like a C-, maybe like C+. There are a couple situations where it was useful. I was using it in the Meridian missions from time to time to try and obscure the drill from enemies so they wouldn't attack it. But I'll be honest, I just used the better option most of the time. The stun grenade. I'm sometimes flip-flopping between the Impact and stun grenade, but most of the time I bring the stun grenade. So most people will be like, why don't you put it in S tier? The stun grenade is a great utility grenade, but it doesn't always deal with the problem. And it doesn't close bug holes, which a lot of people will sometimes find awkward, including myself, when I'm like, damn it, I forgot to bring the grenade pistol, and damn it, I forgot to bring a support weapon that can kill bug holes. Then I'm in this awkward situation where I have a stun grenade, I'm like, well, okay. It's just the fact that the stun grenade needs to be put into very specific loadouts that complement it, whereas the impact grenade just kind of works. It can kind of work with every build, and it is very proficient. So that's kind of why I put, A versus S for stun grenade versus impact, if you're wondering. Going into the thermite, I think the thermite is like a C+, B- kind of grenade. It can be useful in situations where you have a ball titan that's fairly weak and you need that little bit of extra damage to finish it off. But until they just give it more upfront damage per second, or it's in an environment where it can actually break body parts more reliably, if it could, I could throw this at a charger's leg and it would guaranteed 1 thermite break the leg armor, and I don't have to like worry about it not doing that, or like throw 1 thermite on the forehead of a charger, then like, you know, what is it, like 6 to 7 seconds later, it blows up and kills the charger. Dude, it all of a sudden goes immediately to like an A tier grenade. But in this situation, it's just doing such little amounts of damage. And on top of that, if you guys don't know, from testing in the last month, when you throw the thermite, don't throw a second one immediately. Because from what we found is that when you throw 2 immediately, the second grenade is not actually doing any damage over time. Only the first one is. The explosion from both thermites is going off and doing damage, but it doesn't actually seem like it is actually doing anything. So until that changes as well, I can't put it any higher. You should only be throwing 1 at a time at an individual target. Throwing knife is next. What a weird one. I have mixed reaction to it. I am disappointed that I can't use it as a melee weapon. I am disappointed that I can't pick them up, but at least when I go to a resupply, I get all 8 back, which is nice. You know, you're not only getting 2 like with a regular grenade. You're actually getting 6 when you go to the resupply that's dropped from orbit. Also, it does a really cool thing against chargers. It, for some reason, acts like a flamethrower stratagem. And for those who don't know, the flamethrower is most effective when aiming at the charger's leg. It's kind of like a happy accident that the flamethrower goes through the armor of a charger's leg and immediately starts injuring the fleshy bit underneath and can kill a charger in like 2 seconds. Throwing knife does the same thing. Goes through the armor and starts hitting the fleshy under bit of the charger. It only takes 4 throwing knives to kill a charger, and that includes the behemoth charger, which is interesting. And it makes me think, does it deserve to be higher than C tier, which I wanted to put it in because it's not entirely that useful. It's 2 throwing knives to kill a brood commander, or at least remove its head so it runs at you. It's like 1 to 2 to kill a hunter. It's 1 to kill a warrior, but obviously you have to hit the head and then it will run at you. It's 2 to kill a hive guard, if I remember right. I believe it's 2 to kill a bile spewer, which is like, all these things sound all right, but then you have to realize that you have to be fairly close to the enemy. They can't be jumping back and forth, and it's a little bit offset from the crosshair. At least from my experience, I needed to aim a little bit to the right. Maybe that's because the camera's on the right side and you're throwing it and it's a little bit off center. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, it's a lot of work to get not that much when I could just throw an impact grenade. For the reason at the moment that it can kill a charger, I'm going to put it in B tier, okay? But I don't know if it's going to stay like that. I don't know if the devs are going to be like, hey, it's totally fine for it to do this. Maybe in the future it stays. Maybe it gets nerfed. If it gets nerfed, I'd say it's C tier. If they allowed us to start picking them up or use it as a melee weapon, I think I'd start putting it higher. But for the niche of being able to kill a charger, I think it deserves to be B+. All right, looking through the tier list, I feel like I'm fairly happy with it. You know, the ones that, you know, I could easily see a lot of people having trouble with is maybe grenade pistols. Some people, you know, don't like that their secondary can't actually be used as a proper secondary. Another one that I could see a lot of people maybe not feeling great about is maybe the Eruptor being ahead of the crossbow, but I feel like I've, you know, explained that well enough. Tenderizer being this low, I'm sure there's a lot of people that have been really enjoying the Tenderizer. I just feel like it needs more ammo, or needs to have medium pen for it to really be elevated to that next tier. What else? Is there anything else at the moment? No, I feel like I'm pretty happy with it. Please buff the spray and pray if there's any Arrowhead devs watching. And I'm going to call it there. Appreciate you getting to this part of the video. Please consider dropping a sub on the channel if you enjoyed the content, or commenting down below on what you thought of the tier list. I love to hear everybody's feedback on what people think. And just, you know, I love to bounce ideas and just hear how people are using things, because you know, if people really love the Liberator Penetrator and they're using it in this way, let me know how. You know, maybe I'm undervaluing it because I don't use it in that way. Also, I'm sure you probably saw the chat above me. Consider dropping by the stream and talking to me live. We always have these back and forths. I love hearing what people are using weapons for, and maybe I'm using it differently, and we can have that back and forth. Please consider it. All right. Much love, YouTube. Thanks for watching. Bye.